I'm pretty sure that everyone watching this video has probably heard of Cheerios, and I'm also pretty sure that everyone watching this video has also probably eaten a bowl of Cheerios in their lifetime. Now, if I could put a figure on the last time that I ate a bowl of Cheerios, it would probably be around 7 to 9 months ago in the December 2022 period, that sort of time period. But if I could put a figure on the amount of times that I've eaten a bowl of Cheerios, as well as all its sort of off-brand constituents like honey hoops that are made by Tesco's, or multigrain hoops, or O's, or whatever the hell other companies call it, I would probably have eaten a bowl of Cheerios around 1,000 times throughout the years that I have lived on this earth. Now, that is quite a large amount when you sort of think about it. And Cheerios, if you don't live in the UK, because I don't know if Cheerios are as popular in other places like the US, South America, Africa, Asia, Australia, all that sort of stuff. But the fact is that Cheerios are incredibly popular here in the UK, and that as people are watching this video, they probably still have Cheerios and other sort of cereals that are quite generic on a regular basis. But there are some sort of dark secrets about things like Cheerios, Frosties, which are another sort of cereal, that I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, the companies that make these cereals are often either Kellogg's or Nestle, and these are two very, very massive companies which probably own a lot of the foods that you eat. Because while you have things like Cheerios, cornflakes, Frosties, and they all seem like sort of different things made by different people, maybe they were when they sort of started out as a company, but then over the years, all these cereal brands have been bought by people like Kellogg's, like Nestle, and they've also probably owned a load of other things like rice or bread or like milk. They probably own those sort of companies that make milk, etc., or whatever. All these big, massive corporate things that own pretty much all of the food we eat. They're not necessarily very good companies, and I'm going to go over why in this video, because there is some deep science that I need to talk about in this video, as well as a few basic things. And to start off with the basic things is that all these cereals just contain a hell ton of sugar. And if you've watched this channel, you know that I absolutely hate sugar. It's just an awful molecule, such a terrible thing for your body to be consuming on a regular basis. Everyone, when they eat Cheerios, they probably eat this stuff every single day. And the amount of sugar that's in a singular bowl of Cheerios is absolutely insane. And there is one type of cereal that I've mentioned a few times known as Frosties, and these are literally sugar-coated cornflakes. Like, you pick up a flake of Frosties outside of your bowl of cereal and you can see the sugar on that cornflake. It is absolutely insane how much sugar is on this kind of stuff. Yet you will see on the sort of packets of these cereals, like, oh, fortified with vitamin D, vitamin C or whatever, and so people think that it's incredibly really healthy for them because it's made with whole grains and all that kind of good stuff. But it contains a heck ton of sugar, and yet people still think it's healthy for them. And I remember seeing something in the news like at least 5 to 6 months ago where the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, were trying to make these food companies like Kellogg's, Nestle, not be able to label the cereals as healthy, because that's what they currently do. They currently label things like Cheerios, Frosties, a great way to start off your day or whatever, when that's just simply not the case with the amount of sugar that's inside of these sort of bowls of cereal. And then you've also got the milk. You can't really have cereal without milk. And I'm going to go off on a bit of a side tangent here, but many people drink semi-skimmed milk, which is also pretty much a massive scam. I mean, I only drink semi-skimmed milk. I drink whole milk pretty much as much as I can because that contains the most nutrients. But skim milk and even semi-skim milk is pretty much entirely water and just has the bulk of the nutrients just taken out of it in one fell swoop by a hell load of sort of processing machines and vats and all the sort of stuff that you don't really want to sort of be eating food in places where it's been in that sort of environment, if that makes any sense. And then once you've eaten your healthy, fortified with vitamin C and vitamin B1 or whatever, you've eaten your bowl of Cheerios, your bowl of Frosties, then you end up going to school or going to work, and because of all the sugar that's just been inside of that bowl of cereals, you'll then end up having like a carb crash, which you may not even notice throughout the day, which is absolutely stealing your potential, may I add. Every time that you sort of eat these sort of bowls of Cheerios, bowls of Frosties, your insulin will spike to quite a high amount, and if you have And if you have these cereals repetitively for years and days on end, you will end up building up an insulin resistance, which means more insulin needs to be produced to regulate your blood sugar, which absolutely steals your energy and means that you can't live to your best potential. And this is great for the sort of Kellogg's and Nestle, the people that are right at the top of the management, by the way, because you cannot compete with them if you are constantly going through these kind of carb crashes, these sugar crashes, and all that sort of stuff. You cannot compete with them because you are too tired and your potential is just being absolutely zapped out of you. And it just isn't good news for you in general if you sort of eat these cereals on a regular basis. But that is only the basics. That is layer one. That is the tip of the iceberg, if you want to call it like that. There is a bunch of other stuff in Cheerios which may be damaging your health, which is part of the sort of deeper science behind Kellogg's, Nestle, Frosties, Cheerios, and all that sort of stuff. And it's about very complicated molecules which do some pretty bad stuff to your body, and that's going to be the remainder of this video. Now, the two main bad toxic molecules that have been found inside of Cheerios are ZEA and ochratoxin A. Now, ZEA is the first one that we're going to be talking about, and its molecular formula is C18H22O5. And ZEA, it stands for something which I cannot quite remember, unfortunately. It's a mycotoxin, and that means that I think it's sort of derived from mold and mushrooms and all that sort of stuff. And it's also a low-level carcinogen, and while it's not been proved to actually cause cancer in humans, it can possibly cause cancer in humans. And I think that's sort of the whole classification of carcinogens. I'm pretty sure the ZEA is a group 3 carcinogen, and that means that there's not really sufficient evidence that it caused cancer in humans, but tests have been done that may show promising results that it can cause cancer, specifically in animals. Now, while ZEA is also a carcinogen, it is also a very potent estrogenic, and I've talked about estrogenics a lot on this channel, and you may have also heard me talk about something called BPA. Now, BPA is something that is found in a lot of plastic packaging products, the sort of packets that your sort of sunflower oil comes in, your olive oil, your plastic water bottles, all of that probably contains BPA, and even if it sort of says BPA free on the label, that is probably cope, because it's 90%, 100% probably likely to contain BPAF, BPS, BPF, which are sort of different sort of formats, isomers of the same molecule. But as I said before, BPA and all of its other constituents are estrogenic, and if something is estrogenic, that means that it imitates estrogen when inside of the body. Now, hormones and stuff, they will have receptors. So if you imagine you have an estrogen molecule here, and then you have an estrogen receptor here, this estrogen will go into the receptor, and it will fit, and it will send signals around the body to do certain stuff. BPA can fit inside of this estrogen receptor, and it will send signals to the brain that there is estrogen inside of the body. And if BPA from your sort of your like fast packaging, the sunflower oil packaging, or your plastic water bottles, if there is too much BPA inside of the bloodstream from that sort of leaching into your food that you then eat and then gets absorbed, if there is too much of that in your bloodstream, it will fill up the estrogen receptors, and this will signal to the brain that there is way too much estrogen inside of the body. And because testosterone, the main male sex hormone, is the thing that's actually converted into estrogen naturally inside of the body, the brain will stop the production of testosterone so that they can stop estrogen being produced that's actual estrogen and not sort of fake BPA estrogen. And that's a little example, but ZEA essentially does the same thing. And obviously that means that it decreases your testosterone levels, and it just screws up your hormone ratios, because while having high testosterone levels and all is great, apparently it's more so the ratio of like your testosterone to estrogen, your cortisol, your progesterone. What is more so the ratios that matter rather than the actual dead set amount that you have inside of your body. And yeah, having estrogenics inside of your body from consuming things on a daily basis like your Cheerios, like your Frosties, just is not a good sign for your health whatsoever. And the second molecule that I mentioned is ochratoxin A. And while ochratoxin A may not be estrogenic, it is still a mycotoxin, which means that it is also derived from plants and from funguses and mushrooms. It is still carcinogenic, and it is slightly more carcinogenic, in fact, than ZEA. And while I said about the carcinogenic sort of classification before, if ZEA is group 3, and that means that it's not really got sufficient evidence to be carcinogenic in humans, but there has been a few studies that show that it may be carcinogenic in animals, ochratoxinase is a 2B carcinogen, and this means that it is possibly carcinogenic to humans, and there have been a few studies done which show that it may cause cancer, but there's not really enough conclusive evidence just yet, which who knows, that may change in the future. And while ZEA, I've personally heard mentioned on a few YouTube channels, in a few articles, I've never really heard ochratoxin A being mentioned whatsoever, despite it being more of a potentially potent carcinogen, simply because in the sort of self-improvement space, there's a massive testosterone craze going on, where everyone is sort of really cares about getting their testosterone levels as high as they possibly can, which while will have its inevitable benefits, we should also probably be focusing on the whole longevity of our lifespan in general by reducing cancer risks and all that sort of stuff. And if you've watched the end of this video, and I do highly appreciate that and recommend subscribing to get more of this type of content, if you have watched this far, you've probably been wondering how on earth is there ZEA and ochratoxin A in the food, the cereals that I may potentially be eating on a morningly basis. And that is because of mold. Now, while you may not see visible mold on your Cheerios, in some samples, there have been levels of ZEA and ochratoxin A inside of many different sort of carbohydrate and grain products. And it's not just limited to Cheerios or Frosties, by the way. Ochratoxin A and ZEA have been found in beer, barley, rice, oats, any sort of carbohydrate, millet, any wheat, all of this sort of stuff that's like grain sort of based and carb based. ZEA and ochratoxin A have been found in very small levels, milligrams, micrograms even, inside of these sort of carb-based, grain-based products. And that is often because these big companies, like we previously talked about earlier, Kellogg's, Nestle, that own a lot of the food products that we eat on a daily basis, your cereals, maybe even the chocolate bars, the this, the that, the other. All of it is probably owned by like a few 7 companies. All of these companies want to make their products as cheap as possible, not for you, but for them. They want the production process for their products to be as cheap as possible, and so they use the lowest quality wheat, grain, rice, oat, barley, whatever you name it. They use the lowest quality transport from the farms to the factories, and this means that mold can develop inside of the storage for these sort of whole grain things like the rices, the wheats that are used to make the Cheerios, and then you end up with ZEA and ochratoxin A inside of the food that you may potentially be eating, which just isn't a good sign in general, and things definitely need to be done about this, and hopefully the first step is awareness, and I'm trying to give that to you, because while it's not exactly definite that the food that you ate, the Cheerios that you may potentially have eaten this morning, contained any ZEA or ochratoxin A at all, there have conclusively and objectively been ZEA and ochratoxin A inside of samples of Cheerios and cereals before, and so I don't really know how conclusive evidence I can give you. I may link a few of the sort of articles and sources that I found this stuff in the description, but yeah, it's just mind-blowing to me that this stuff actually sort of exists in our diet, and I just highly recommend not really eating any of the sugary cereals because they are sugary. That's just a basic no-no. That's really bad. And it's also got things like ochratoxin A, ZEA in it. If you really didn't need anything, if just having high sugar breakfast wasn't enough to sort of deter you, this stuff is estrogenic and it's potentially carcinogenic in humans. So hopefully that's enough for you to stop eating things like Cheerios, Frosties, forever and ever and ever again. And yeah, I wish you good luck on this journey. And I also highly recommend subscribing because I love this community of young tribal people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have. And good luck.